Okay, so today we are going to be talking about Richard Feynman, who was a physicist who, contributed a lot to the field of physics and was born here in the United States and won the Nobel Prize in a field of physics. And of course, we'll get all into that. But I specifically chose Richard Feynman due to my interest in the Manhattan Project and its contributions to physics. And he was a very young contributor to the Manhattan Project, and I think I found that very interesting. So, as we go through, we'll learn a little bit about who Richard Feynman is. To start, he was born in 1918 in Queens, New York, to Jewish immigrant parents. His father was from Minsk, Russia, I believe, and his mother immigrated from Poland. So Jewish parents of two different countries. And we'll get more into this through the presentation, but he was known very much for his curiosity, humor, and unconventional thinking and teaching in the way he taught as a professor, his curiosity and his humor as he was growing up and learning more as a young protege, and believed that science should be accessible and joyful. He really broke this mold of what it meant to be a scientist, not some, old stuffy man who was kind of rigid in the way he thought. He was energetic and wanted people to learn because he felt everybody was capable of it. So, growing up, he kind of learned that from his parents. His father, taught him to question authority, but also supported him, and his mother as well supported him in all of his endeavors. And they both wanted him to learn. And growing up during the Great Depression, it made it very difficult. But his family still persisted and wanted him to, really attack education in a way in which he could just learn as much as he could because they knew what he was capable of. And of course, during this time, being the 30s and gearing up towards World War II, there was a lot of anti Semitism in education and academia. We see this especially because in the science world, as a result of Adolf Hitler's stance on, quantum physics, him thinking, there were a lot of Jewish scientists at the time who studied this particular science, and he referred to it as Jewish science. And so that people believe that that might have been part of why the Nazi regime was kind of on the back foot of the whole, developing the atomic bomb and that race for that, because they didn't really have the resources that America was willing to put into it. So there was always anti-Semitism. I mean, there's still anti-Semitism to this day, but it was particularly prevalent during that time. Now, some really big scientific contributions that he made were obviously he specialized in quantum mechanics, but he made major contributions to quantum electrodynamics, or QED. All right, and quantum electrodynamics is a field of theory describing how light and matter interact. And so, specifically within that field, he came up with the Feynman diagrams. So, the Feynman diagrams are a way to visualize particle interactions in quantum physics. And basically, it just represents the paths in space-time using lines and vertices to calculate probabilities of these events. So an example could be like an electron scattering or beta decay. So they're drawings to help translate a more complex idea. And really, in the end, he won the Nobel Prize in physics for QED, for his quantum electrodynamics and his contributions in that field. So some major contributions that he made. Now, something really big that I talked about earlier was the Manhattan Project. Now, he was a very young contributor to the Manhattan Project at just about 24. He was the youngest group leader, and he worked very closely with Robert J. Oppenheimer. Robert Oppenheimer was very fond of Richard, and he said that Richard Feynman was one of the brightest young physicists at this camp at Los Alamos, and everybody here knows it. So, if that gives you any sort of idea of the influence Richard Feynman had and the contribution and the impression that he had on Robert J. Oppenheimer, who's the leader of this group, this camp at Los Alamos, it's really something. Additionally, going back to kind of that playfulness of Richard Feynman, when he would get bored, he would often pick the locks of his colleagues' safes and prank them by placing things in with their personal belongings and their files and little prank notes and things like that. He was very charismatic. He played bongos. He was fun. He was energetic, and he kept that going into his teaching career at Caltech. I did want to go back real quick, talking about the reflected on ethical consequences. This was something that happened with many of the scientists that worked on that project. Many of the scientists, including Robert J. Oppenheimer, were very against the use of the atomic bomb. They felt that this was a great contribution for science, but, and it all started with the splitting of the atom, but and that chain reaction that it created, but then using it against people, obviously, Robert J. Oppenheimer had lots of qualms with that. Richard Feynman shared in the ethical consequences that it could create. And so Richard Feynman was among many of the other scientists who really, had some qualms with the way it was used and, what they did there. But he was a famous professor at Caltech, again, known for his unconventional thinking and teaching. He was the author of the Feynman Lectures on Physics, and he was known for curiosity and integrity. He felt that everybody was capable of learning, and that was a wonderful thing. So, I have a video that I want to show. Hopefully it will load. My thinking of it. So I really think, and I won't play this whole clip, but I think it's a really great clip, this famous speech from an interview that he did. I think it really does sum up who Richard Feynman was. The fact that anybody could be anything if they just devoted the time to do it. And he believed science was like that for everybody. He just believed he was an ordinary person who got motivated and, studied really hard and, you know, learned about quantum mechanics, and anybody could do that. So I think that Richard Feynman's, message to people, it can transcend anything, and I think that that's something that makes him a very unconventional thinker in the science field. That anybody can do science. You don't have to be gifted in one way or another. It's for everybody. So that's Richard Feynman, and I hope you enjoy.